She was first. Yes.
Sponge?
No, no, not exactly. Yes.
Ice?
Sorry.
Looks like hot ice.
Ice? No, no. I'll tell you, it's in the summer. Yes.
I'm pretty sure it looks like to me in the desert where they have like all the like where the rivers used to be, like all of the dirt is so dry that it begins to crack into.
Oh yeah, and it kind of looks like that. It's not exactly that. It's actually water. Yeah, and it's hard to tell. That's like rocks and like water. I think Eric was next. Yes.
Isn't that just like coral or?
Nope, nope. Yes.
Pollen?
It is pollen. Yeah, good guess. Nice, awesome. And, nice. And your name is?
Rebecca?
Rebecca. Nice. Good job. Nice one, Rebecca. Good call. I guess. I don't know if anyone else had that same thought, but yeah, it's pollen. I think it's pine pollen, and it's relevant because this is the next proxy record that I work with. So, so this is a pollen core. It's like an ice core, but what they do is they go into bogs and they take out like pollen records. And what they do is like this is a species, and they're able to go in with microscopes and actually look and determine and identify what each species of pollen is based on the pollen like grain. And sometimes you can do down to species, sometimes you can do down to genus. We can see, say this is like 40,000 years ago and this is 0, that there's a change in, this is grassland. And you can see that about 5,000 years, this changes from grassland to forest. And then this is a pine tree in Brazil. You see that this is actually very low and then actually increases. So you can see that at about 4,000 years, there's a change from grassland to forest in southern Brazil. And so you can actually go back and core and look at the pollen and determine what was in the landscape around at that time. So I know it's a lot of information, guys. I hope you just take away general ideas of like methods of how to date age and like why we came to the conclusions of global warming and that things are warmer now and vegetation is all different today than the past, right? So yes.
This it seems like between the first and second types of pollen, one decreased while the other increased at about the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know why that is, or?
I would say it's just probably literal replacement. It's really interesting because it always isn't one to one like this. Some species produce a lot more pollen than others. Some species don't even produce wind dispersed pollen. So this is a really good example. It's probably one of the best examples because this is like we have a grassland and we have a pine tree that produces a lot of wind dispersed pollen. And that shows the greatest split, but it's not always like that actually. And I can show you actually the next slide. Actually, this one, where like for example, it's actually great because this fits into this question really well. Where like if you look at the abundance of individuals, like just say number of individuals, right? So this little blue, there's all these little ones, right? So we see it's like the most, and say this is like a lake. Say this blue is like a lake, and these are trees. This so it has the most number, and then this has the fewest. But if these two produce the most amount of pollen, and like say these produce the fewest, if you look at the pollen record alone, it actually would incorrectly say that the blue one is actually the least frequent, right? So that's exactly your point. Sometimes some species don't produce as much, so you kind of have to look at it as kind of like an ecosystem and not a species. Kind of like grassland, forest, shrubland, desert, and then there's identifier species within each one that produce a lot of pollen. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a great question because that really answers it really well. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Or yes, sir. I never got your name. Your name is
Spencer?
Spencer. Oh, you did. Yeah, you did, Spencer. Sorry, my fault.
What about bees in terms of making pollen?
Bees? Yeah, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they have contributed because the bees do fall to the bottom of like a lake. I would say it's probably more just like wind dispersion of pollen because like as you saw in that lake, it was just like covered in pollen, so it's probably more likely the just wind dispersion that covers the lake and sinks to the bottom. But
also, when they take it from the flowers, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Is that bad for the flowers when they take the pollen from it?
no, it's actually preferred. It's actually a good thing because
They can make more, right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. So they can, I guess, create. So most flowers are both male and female, right? So they produce pollen and they have female like receptors, and so when a bee goes from flower to flower, they actually exchange the genetic material between the flowers, and that's why flowers are so like bright and colorful because they want to like try to attract the pollinators, and yeah, it's for sure that's the yeah, bees and flowers are that's the main I guess what's it called
Symbiotic.
thing. Yeah, exactly. Yes,
This is more about photosynthesis.
sure.
In winter time, because all the leaves fall off the trees, does that mean that they produce less air when we breathe out our carbon dioxide?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly why we see those cycles. Yeah, they do produce less oxygen. Well, yeah, yes, they do produce less oxygen and they intake less carbon dioxide, and I'm sure it's linearly related to. Yeah, nice. Yes, Spencer.
So pine trees are pretty good because their leaves don't fall off.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. That's actually really good point. Yeah, like boreal forests, I think represent a third of the forests on Earth, and it's all green all year round and very slow growing, but they still again different strategies, right? Really slow growth. They don't grow that much, but they grow all the time. So, yes, Spencer.
And like, when the pine trees drop pine cones, is there pollen in the pine cones?
Sometimes, but it's not like the main source. That's actually so the pollen comes from like the male part of the of like a pine tree. A pine tree has male and female um, I guess flowers. I believe it does. I don't believe it's separate sexes, but and yeah. So the pollen part's actually, if you look at a pine tree, there will be not the cones, but there's like little buds, and if you pinch them, it'll be all. If you crush it up, it'll be all pollen. That's the pollen part of it. Yeah, you should try it. Try it one time, you know, for sure. Okay, I guess I'll keep going. I'm gonna go a little. Okay, I'm doing okay for time. Okay, nice. Great. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you having me here. It's very nice. Okay. So, it's a location of just the profiles of the pollen around the world that haven't been publicly available, and I did some work with this data. Again, very grateful. It's all about science. Science is all about like sharing your work, sharing the data, sharing results, because it's really that's what makes it better. That's what makes it. It's how we learn more, right? It's just sharing information and getting as many people with their ideas to work with the same data, right? And so there's a lot of like database online where you can download the pollen for free. Like I part of my Ph.D. project using pollen data. I'll go a little bit into it after. But so part number 2. This part's pretty short. It's just talking about like warming and CO2 enrichment experiments. So the first part was kind of like the past and how we know, like how do we know that all of this really is like going to affect climate in the future. And so this one is kind of like what scientists are doing today. So we know CO2 is important, we know temperature is important, and we know like nitrogen is important. So let's do experiments on them, right? So this is the called FACE, which is the free air CO2 enrichment experiment. And what you can see, these are just like a forest. This is Duke University, I believe. No, it's Aspen. Yeah, I think it's Duke. And what they have like these like PVC pipes set up, and they built these. It's pretty simple. They built these like PVC poles with these trees in the middle, and they just like blast CO2 into this like area, and you can see it's like open air. It's free open air. These are huge CO2 canisters here. It's pretty expensive, pretty sophisticated setup. And I don't know if they're really contributing to global warming much by shooting all the CO2 in the air, but it's for science, right? It's for